Hi, my name is Alexandra, and welcome back to River Dragon Mystic. Today, we're going to be talking about what it feels like to have natal Mercury retrograde. I personally have Mercury retrograde in my chart, so I'm very familiar with how this energy manifests. And in general, when somebody has any kind of planet retrograde, that planet can be a source of a lot of frustration, especially in early life. It's one of the indicators that someone is a late bloomer in their full expression of whatever planet is retrograde in their chart. And a theory as to why this happens is that the planet is asking the person to refine the qualities of that planet in this lifetime and to build on past life karma that needs to be reworked before the soul can evolve. If you come across a chart with quite a few planets that are retrograde, then it's almost guaranteed that that person is not a brand new soul. They have been around for a while and they're trying to rework through quite a bit of karma, which can be actually a great thing. And having a natal Mercury retrograde is quite common. It's the most common planet you can have retrograde as it goes into that state around 3 times a year. So approximately 20% of the global population has this in their chart. What is Mercury about? It's about your logical mind. It's about how you process information, how you learn. It can talk about the way that you communicate as well. And there is a side to Mercury that is actually about finances and business as well, but I'm not going to focus on that too much in this video. I'll make a separate video touching on those aspects. So what does it feel like to have your Mercury retrograde natally? I picture it as the mind like a washing machine. So it needs to take an idea, process it multiple times from different angles, and then after the processing or the washing cycle is complete, then the idea or the knowledge is fully integrated within the person's psyche. And in a Western school system, that is my experience as I am Canadian, and I'm sure that most standardized school systems are probably similar, but please let me know in the comments if you're from somewhere else in the world what your standard educational system is like. That's interesting to me. So what happens when young children that have Mercury retrograde go into a standardized, rigid educational system? They can sometimes actually be misdiagnosed with having learning disabilities. And it's usually not the case at all that they are lacking intelligence, but that their logical mind is processing the information down on more of a cellular level. So once that process is complete, the knowledge exists much deeper and has way more integration into a general life understanding and is often memorized for much longer than somebody that would have their Mercury direct. So pursuing higher education can actually be more successful for these people when they go into it after Mercury has fully matured. You would be better off going into college or university in your late 20s or early 30s versus what most of us are conditioned into doing, which is going into a really expensive program at age 18 or 19 when you don't have any actual life experience or worldly knowledge yet. So that can bring much better results versus going into those high stakes classes when you're too young. So with any retrograde planet, it's safe to assume that that planet is acting unconventionally in some way. With Mercury in this case, it's like the mind is wired differently from what is commonly accepted and nurtured in mainstream society. So it's common for Mercury retrograde natives to report feeling stupid when comparing themselves to their peers. And again, that is probably not the truth of the situation at all. And I would bet that that person would actually thrive in an environment that is more conducive to their constitution. So, an example being a retrograde Mercury child would maybe thrive in a self-directed learning system, such as the Montessori school system, versus feeling stifled and not up to par in a rigid school system that doesn't support them. It's also very common for children with this placement to be very quiet and shy in their early years. The older that they get and the more that Mercury matures in the chart, hopefully their confidence will grow by this point, and that social awkwardness will fade into someone who articulates themselves very effectively. So usually these people are not make random nonsensical small talk type people. They want to speak with a lot of intention and a lot of purpose, and their words can hit with much more gravity than somebody that just, talks and talks and talks about nothing. That's not really who these people are. So when comparing themselves to people who have Mercury direct, it can feel that the retrograde mind is wired backwards. And I had to add that because somebody actually said that to me. I think your mind is wired backwards. They, they tend to approach problems in a way that is different from the average. This placement can be seen in people who are genuinely inventive and may question the standard way of doing things. They can come up with brilliant ways of organizing information. And Mercury retrograde is also very conscious of their actions in retrospect. So they are more introspective in nature, and they can usually see quite clearly on how they need to improve upon their basis of knowledge. So there's often an ingrained perfectionism and very deep anxiety about getting things incorrect or wrong. So even though having a placement like this can feel isolating and kind of cursed in a way, it's important to understand that any ideas that you may want to express or communicate may be much bigger and more complex than the norm. And this requires more time to perfect before being released into the public. It's ideal to not rush yourself if at all possible. Begin whatever work you would like to achieve with a private rough draft that is not interrupted by any outside influences or opinions, as that can pretty easily throw you off. Finish your private rough draft, and then in retrograde fashion, go back and edit your first draft and rework it and add any additional nuance that you need for it to be effective. And after going through this process, you may find that your quality of work is much more detailed and much more accurate compared to those who rush forward without deeply considering their ideas or what they would like to say. And when needing to communicate any kind of important information in any environment, in work, in relationships, anything that has weight to it, I would recommend sitting down in a quiet environment and writing down everything that you need to cover, everything that is important to convey across to the other person. And this is going to reduce a lot of the mental pressure that I'm sure you're very familiar with. And it can also help with that anxiety and chronic perfectionism that often comes with this placement. So come back to what you wrote down as many times as necessary before presenting it to the public. So as an example, a person like this would probably thrive more if they presented their information in a concise way from some notes rather than spitballing on a live podcast. Not saying you can't do that, but as a general rule with this placement, it's often better to plan your work ahead of time. This placement can give a very active mind, a very overthinking type of mind. I picture it as like an Ouroboros, like the snake eating its own tail. If it's left to ruminate on things for too long, it can just completely burn you out and suck a lot of the energy from you. So having any kind of mindfulness practice, it doesn't matter what it is, just whatever works for you, is really important to live with this type of mind. And actually, one bonus of having Mercury retrograde in your chart is that when Mercury goes retrograde by transit, which people tend to, oh my God, freak out about, it doesn't mess with you so much. I have tested this in my personal life. I don't have all my technology going crazy. I don't have my car breaking down. I don't have mishaps at work. Like, I feel that the world is sort of operating on the way that my mind works for once. So pay attention to when Mercury goes retrograde by transit and just notice if you're actually thriving compared to people that have Mercury direct and they may be experiencing more of these issues. That's going to be totally chart dependent, but it's something to pay attention to. And I wanted to present some more evidence that people with retrograde Mercuries can achieve incredible things. And I've pulled a few example charts that show having this type of Mercury does not actually amount to a lack of intelligence. And as I show you these examples, just keep in mind that I use the sidereal zodiac. I do not use the Western zodiac. So my best example is J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, arguably one of the greatest stories of all time. He has Mercury retrograde in the fifth house, in Sagittarius, in the Mula Nakshatra. He was known to be a perfectionist and was frequently distracted or forced to stop writing due to external events such as World War I, World War II as well. If you know the story and you really think about how complex and detailed the world that he has created, I'm referring to Middle Earth, with different races, a very intricate map that you can see in the books, history of all the different races, and he even invented languages. I don't believe that story would have been as impactful as it was if it had been rushed. The manuscript for The Hobbit actually sat dormant for years until his publisher encouraged him to finish it. And when he did finish the final chapters, he actually went back and rewrote chapter 5 of The Hobbit all over again just to edit Gollum's behavior. And then after that, he spent 12 years writing Lord of the Rings, followed by 5 years of editing and publishing delays. So the Lord of the Rings trilogy in total took 17 years to complete and release to the public. I think studying his life shows such an obvious and beautiful explanation of what it means to have this placement. And even though it is very frustrating, as you can see, he had a lot of hurdles in his work. Persistence and patience can massively pay off. A few other examples of very well-known people that have Mercury retrograde. Tim Burton has it in the fourth house in Leo in Mega, and I think about his claymation movies, how absurdly long it took to make those. They're gorgeous and so entertaining to watch. Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World, has it in the second house in Cancer in the Punarvasu nakshatra. And I love another example that I absolutely love is Princess Diana has it in Gemini in the Ardra nakshatra. And she actually didn't do very well in her schooling when she was a child and teenager. And she actually left school at age 16. She was known as very shy, but ended up using her inner talents in her charity work, which was very impactful on many, many people over many years. And what I know about doing charity work is I think that you have to have an exceptionally good mind at organizational skills. And if you read more into her story, you can see that she was operating at like way up here, even though the school system didn't recognize that she actually had insane talent. So this wraps up my explanation of natal Mercury retrograde. I really hope that this helped to correct the narrative that it's so bad. It's not. It's just that it requires some mental Jedi skills to work with in a productive way. It requires you getting out of your own way in a lot of ways, which can be very hard. I believe that with enough persistence, anybody can use this to its highest expression in their chart. Thank you for watching and subscribe to my channel for more astrology and occult insights.